This video will work through problem 13.1 from Gapenski's Healthcare Finance, 6th edition. Okay, so 13.1 asks us, this is a problem where we're going to do some comparisons between two different capital structures to figure out what the impact on return on equity, net income, and total dollar return to investors will be based on changes in capital structure. So we start with an assumption that the firm has an EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes, of $1 million. It pays taxes of 40%. It has $5 million in assets. So we're going to have variation 1 is going to be 100% equity financing, and then variation 2 is going to have 50-50 financing. So let's start by writing out our kind of make-believe balance sheet here. So remember, the balance sheet has two sides. You have your asset side, so total assets for the 100% equity, and then we'll do over here the 50-50 equity and debt. So total assets is going to be 5 million. I'm just going to abbreviate that as 5,000 K, and it's going to be true regardless of the way that the organization is financed, right? Because it's kind of like when we talk about a house, for as an example here. If you're driving down the street and you see a cute house and you're like, hey, that's a cute house. And you go on your phone and you pull up Zillow and you're like, how much does that cute house cost? And they say, oh, it costs $500,000. You say, great, that's the total asset value of the house. But you don't know, what you don't know from looking on Zillow, at least as far as I know, you don't know, is how much debt and how much equity the owners of the house have. So regardless, so my point here is, what if they, the $500,000 house, they have, say, 100% equity, then they would have zero debt. And if they had 50% equity and 50% debt, then this would be, they would have 250,000, or in our example, 2.5 million. And then for equity, which would be common stock if this is a for-profit, would be, in this case, it's 100% equity. So the equity is going to be equal to the total assets. But if you're 50-50, then your equity plus your debt has to add up to your total assets. So in this case, right, we wind up with total liabilities and owner's equity of 5,000 and 5,000, and you want these two to match so that they balance, right? Because that's what a balance sheet does. Okay, so we know that. Now we get to our income statement. So with our income statement, we were told we have an EBIT of $1 million, right? And the EBIT is not affected by the capital structure. However, that's earnings before interest and taxes. So how about our interest expense? Well, if you have no debt, then you have no interest expense. But if you have 50% debt, and the book says that it has, the firm has an 8%, pays 8% on its debt. So 8% of 2,500 is 200,000. So our earnings, our taxable income then becomes whatever our EBIT is minus our interest expense. So in this case, it's 1,000. And in this case, it's 1,000 minus 200, or 800. And so then the taxes are going to be 40%. So 40% of 1,000 is 400. 40% of 800 is 320. So then we have our net income of 1,000 minus 400 is 600. 800 minus 320 is 480. So there's our net income. And then the question is, what's the total dollar return to investors? Total dollar return. Now, this is a little bit of a trick question because they want you to think about what they mean by investors. And so if you think about investors as anyone who lends money or buys into the equity from the firm, then um, you're thinking a little more broadly than if you think of investors as strictly common stockholders. So under the 100% version, the total dollar return is 600 because the only investors investing in the firm are the common stockholders. However, under the 50-50, we have common stockholders who invest 2,500, and then we have debt holders who are also a kind of investor, right? Investing 2,500, and so the total return to the stockholders is 480, and the return to the debt holders is 200. So you have 200 plus 480 equals 680, right? So the book is asking you to think of debt holders as a kind of investor because they actually are, but it's a little bit of a trick question. I would tend to think, oh, investor, that's common stockholder, but that's not actually what we're after here. Okay, so that gives us net income and total dollar return. How about ROE? Okay, ROE is strictly calculated on net income. So the ROE in this case is going to be net income is 600 divided by the common stock, which is 5,000. So 600 divided by 5,000 is 12%. And then under this version, we get net income of 480, but it's divided by 2,500. So 480 divided by 2,500 gives us 19.2%. All right. So if you have one way to increase your ROE, of course, is to change your capital structure and increase the amount of debt that you're using to finance your organization and reduce the amount of equity. So even though the net income goes down because they're paying interest expense now, the denominator shrank by half, so shrank by more than the numerator did, and so we wind up with an increase in ROE. Okay, that's part A. So let's see. Part B says redo the analysis now, assuming that debt financing would cost 15%. So the 100% stock doesn't have any effect, but our for our 50-50 financing, it'd be different. So the EBIT is still $1 million, right? Interest expense now is calculated at 15% of 2,500. So 0.15 times 2,500 gives us 375. So our taxable income becomes 1,000 minus 375, or 625. Then our taxes are going to be 40% of 625. So 625 times 0.4 is 250. Right? And so we got 400, 375 in net income. Okay, so total return would be 375 plus 375 in net income plus 375 in interest expense gives us 750, right? 375 times 2, 750. Okay. In total return, the ROE, however, is 375 divided by 2,500, right? 375 divided by 2,500 gives us 15% ROE. So we have a higher total return to investors, but a lower ROE to our common stockholders. All right, part B asks us to think about this as to go back and use the 8% interest rate for EBIT and to look at both the 100% and the 50/50 financing. But instead of assuming that we have a 100% chance of getting a million in EBIT, we have a 20% chance of 500,000, a 20% chance of 1.5 million, and a 60% chance of EBIT, so of a million. So let's do one at a time. So if we have EBIT of 500,000, and that's going to be 20%, we have a 60% chance of a million and a 20% chance of 1.5 million. Then we have interest expense. Interest expense is going to be 8%. Sorry, this is the 100% financing version, so there's no interest expense. And so taxable income is the same as EBIT. And so the taxes are still at 40%. So 40% of 500 is 200, 40% of 1,000 is 400, and 40% of 1,500 is 600. So then we have net income of 300, 600, and 900. And since this is 100% equity financed, then the total return to investors is going to be the same as the net income. ROE is going to be 300 divided by 5,000, which is 6%. 600 divided by 5,000, which we already did, is 12%. And then 900 divided by 5,000, which is 18%. Sorry, 18%. So what is the expected return on investment? Well, that would be 0.2 times 6% plus 0.6 times 12% plus 0.2 times 18% would give us an expected ROE of 12%. Right, that's our weighted average based on the probabilities. And then the expected total dollar return is the same way. It's going to be 0.2 times 300 plus 0.6 times 600 plus 0.2 times 900, right, would give us an expected return of 600. Now, it just happens that it equals the 0.6, and that's just the way they wrote it. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be that way, so don't assume that, right? Don't assume that whatever the middle value is always going to be what the expected value is. That is not the case. So that's for the 100% financing. So then we need to move to the 50/50 financing. So for 50/50, right, so we're just going to have the same setup here, EBIT, and then income, interest expense, taxable income, taxes, right, and net income. So you have 20%, 60%, 20%. So the EBIT, 500,000, 1 million, and 1,500. The interest expense, so now we're assuming 8% interest expense. So that's going to be 200 across the board. And why is that? Because the amount of debt you have doesn't vary with the different possible outcomes for your operations, right? These are two separate things. So taxable income then becomes 300, 800, and 1,500 minus is 1,300. Right. Taxes is 40% of 300 would be 120. 40% of 800 is 320, and 40% of 1,300 is 520. Okay. So net income then would be 380. Sorry, did I make a mistake here? Taxes, sorry, 180, not 380. 800 minus 320 is 480. And then 1300 minus 520 is 780. So total return would be 180 plus 200 is going to be 380. 480 plus 300 is going to be 680. 780 plus 200 is going to be 980. Right. And then ROE is going to be 180 divided by 2,500. So 180 divided by 2,500 gives me 7.2%, 19.2%, and 31.2%. Right. So that's 480 divided by 2,500, 780 divided by 2,500. And so the expected total dollar return would be 0.2 times 380 plus 0.6 times 480 plus 0.2 times 780 would give us 680. And then the expected ROE would be 0.2 times 7.2 plus 0.6 times 19.2 plus 0.2 times 31.2, which gives us 19.2%. So the expected ROE. And remember, again, they've chosen, the book has chosen to have the numbers work out this way such that the middle value is the expected value, but that just is, that's not going to be true in a real world scenario, and it might not be true in a test condition. So don't assume that, oh, the expected value is going to be whatever the middle is. All right. So we work through that. And then part D asks us, repeat the analysis required for part A, but now assume that the health plan is a not-for-profit corporation and pays no taxes. Compare the results with those obtained in part A. All right. So if we pay no taxes, then we've got EBIT, and we've got the 100% financing and the 50-50 financing. Right. So the EBIT is going to be $1 million and $1 million. Right. And you've got interest expense. So that's independent of whether you're for profit or not. But at 100% equity, you have no interest expense. At 50-50 equity, and this is going to be the 8%. So we're going to assume 200,000. So taxable income is, if it's not for profit, the taxable income, well, the income is, there is no taxable income, and so we just go straight to net income. So that's 1,000, and that is 800, right? And then the total dollar return, well, that'd be 1,000, because that is it's 100% equity financing. The total dollar return to investors under the 50-50 is 800 in net income plus 200 in interest expense. So that's 1,000. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is that this entity is not paying taxes, right? So a portion of the earnings in the other examples was being taken and given to the government. So I guess in some abstract way, you could say, well, the government is kind of like an investor in this company too. And so you could add it all back up, and the earnings eventually wind up somewhere, but we don't typically think like that. We don't think of the government as an investor. Maybe depending on your political leanings, you might think so, but we don't do that in finance. So net income of 1,000 divided by 5,000, that's going to get you a 20% return on equity. And then 800 divided by 2,500 is going to get you a return on equity of 32%. So much higher returns on equity, again, because you're not paying any taxes. Okay, so that is Part D, and that finishes up 13.1.